You're listening to Potty Mouth Radio, the home of movies, music, television, and comedy.
And now, the hunt for the perfect album.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Hunt for the Perfect Album with Billy and Dave, where this week we're looking at an album that you've thrown at me, mate.
Yep, more Laurie Anderson, my friend.
That's right. So we've already had a chat about Laurie Anderson in the past. You gave me her, I believe, was it her first album?
Yeah, first album, Big Science.
I was reading that this is her fifth album and fourth studio album. And I was reading that this was in production for a long time, because when she decided to make it more of a musical album, she started recording it, realized she needed singing lessons, and went away for a year to take singing lessons before finishing it off.
I mean, I'm biased, but I think you can tell.
Yeah.
I think her voice on this album is just beautiful.
Now, I forget, did you say last time that this was the album you heard first of hers?
It was, yeah. So I got introduced to this by a friend in high school, and fell in love, and then sort of deep dived in the way that you did back then by going down to the road to Zounds record store and going alphabetically through the aisles, high fidelity style, until I found the Laurie Anderson section.
Yeah.
And you couldn't even Google and shit back then. I don't even know how I maybe I just through older friends or something. But I bought everything I could sort of get my hands on, which was sort of the albums in between Strange Angels and Big Science. So there's Mr. Heartbreak. I'm not sure if Big Red's in there. And then she had a couple of stage shows that had Home of the Brave and things like that had albums associated with them. And sort of mapped the trajectory longhand through her career. And but I think this has always probably been my favorite of her albums, just because I've got that sort of association with those high school years from it.
Yeah.
And I particularly certain tracks on the album I find almost meditative. I can put them on and just kind of close my eyes and sort of float away a little. That sounds rather wanky, but I'm keen to know what you think of it.
Let's get into it then, because I had no idea what to expect, obviously, after Big Science, which was a very out there, very performance.
There was some highs and lows for you in that one.
You said that this was more strictly music, but knowing what I heard on that album, I was expecting this to still be a little bit out there. So relatively short album. I mean, it's long in length. It's 45 minutes, but only 10 tracks. So the tracks aren't short, but so, you know, I throw it on and we get into some Strange Angels, which is the title track.
It's like TV, a perfect little world that doesn't really need you. And everything there is made of light. And the days keep going by. Here they come. Here they come.
And I was like, wow, this is super 80s. Like this doesn't sound like the Laurie Anderson I know from Big Science. This is an 80s pop
different
song. This is... It sounded upsettingly generic to me. I was really hoping that Laurie Anderson would hit me with something different, you know, because that's what I got from Big Science. Even the tracks I didn't like, you're not going to hear them from anyone else. But that first track...
There's less avant-garde musicianship in this album in general. I think lyrically, I think she's all over this. This is not mainstream pop lyrics.
Yeah.
But she's fundamentally gone out to try and make a music album here.
Yeah. So I have to admit I was a little bit disappointed with that opening track just because, like I said, I don't think it's a bad song. It just, to me, was very much like, oh, this could be any 80s pop singer at this point. But then I threw on track 2, Monkey's Paw. And this is when I started to really enjoy what I was hearing.
Well, I stopped in at the body shop. Said to the guy, I want stereo FM installed in my teeth. Then take this mole off my back and put it on my cheek. And while I'm here, why don't you give me some of those high-heeled feet?
Easily my favorite track on this album.
Oh, interesting.
I love this track because this is what I was looking for when I threw this album on. Like, it's musical. It's much more musical than anything on Big Science, I think.
Yeah.
But it's unexpected.
It's weirdly,
Yeah.
surrealistically poetic and
Yes, and even the way she's using her voice, she's not just singing it like a pop singer. This straddles this weird line between like beat poetry and singing, and she's using the tone of her voice in ways that are not singing but is still musical. And that's easily hands down my favorite track on this album. Because I don't think we ever reached the heights of that song again.
wow.
Track 3, Coolsville, is probably my least favorite track on the album.
Yep, I'd probably be with you there.
Not a huge fan of that
not my
one.
favorite.
I do like track 4 though. Ramon?
Ramon.
Last night I saw a host of angels, and they were all singing different songs, and it sounded like a lot of lawnmowers mowing down my lawn. And up above,
You and I have spoken about this before when a singer gives you something unexpected. And I think that this song does that. Like, this is, again, much more of an 80s pop song. But melodically, I think she does something different with it where I just don't think your ears are expecting to hear the notes they do.
Yep.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I'm with you.
But then from there, I continue a bit of a odds and evens thing because I don't like Baby Doll at all. Which I was reading was probably one of the more well-known ones from this album. Like, I believe that she may have performed that one on SNL when she did a guest spot there.
Oh wow, okay. Yeah, no, I have never since high school come across someone that knows this album. So,
Okay.
I'd be surprised that any of these have been played anywhere
ever. Beautiful Red Dress is another one that I find interesting. I wouldn't say I love it, but I think it's another more interesting track on the album.
Yep.
and everybody was talking at once, and it was getting real true. But I've been around the block, but I don't care. I'm on a roll, I'm on a wild ride. 'Cause the moon is full, and look out, baby, I'm at high tide. I've got a beautiful red dress, and you look really good. Step aside.
There's almost something Genesis about that track. A little bit Peter Gabriel sounding.
Yeah, I could get there. Yeah, the bass line in particular. I can see
Yeah.
that.
But again, that's one that I really like. It's another track that I find really interesting in what it's doing. And I love her voice when she speaks. I think that's what I'm missing most from this album, is that on Big Science, there was a lot of that kind of ASMR type stuff, which was very enjoyable. And I agree with you. I think that you can see that she's had singing lessons. Like, I think that this is a well put together album. I just think I was, it's like when I saw The Northman for the first time. And I was like, okay, it's Eggers. This is going to be super fucked up. This is, he's made some great, weird kind of horror films. This is going to be really cool. And the first time I saw it, I was like, wow, that was I didn't want to sound like a wanker, but I'm like, oh, that's kind of mainstream. Like, it's, but then on rewatch, I appreciate it a lot more. And I'm expecting the same thing to happen with this album. Like, on future listens, I think I'll appreciate what she's doing more. And obviously, like you said, I think lyrically, she's very poetic. And I think that part of my problem with this album is just in the production and the tone of her voice. I find it hard to pick out the lyrics in this one as much as I did in Big Science, just due to the way that she's singing them. So I think the more I listen to it and the more I get the meaning of the songs and hear the lyrics a little bit better, I expect that I'll like this album more and more every time I listen to it. That said, The Day of the Devil is another track that I really enjoy.
Yeah.
The day the devil comes to get ya, you know him by the way he smiles. The day the devil comes to get ya, he's a rusty truck with only 20 miles. He's got bad brains, he's got loose teeth, he's a long way from home. The day the devil comes to get ya.
I love the harmonies. The harmonies in that track are great. That's another one that's up there as one of my favorites. I enjoy that, which is, I'm sad to say, probably the last track on the album that I really, really enjoy.
Really?
Yeah, The Dream Before, by about the third time I listened to it, I started to like it more. It's probably the most poetic track on the album. It's the one that I could most pick up the lyrics because it's very slow, it's very soft.
History's an angel being blown backwards into the future.
Yes, very famous
That's
line.
awesome.
Yeah. And yeah, so, there's, of the final three, this is my favorite.
Right.
But you know what? I think you just need to be in the right headspace. Like you said about it being a bit meditative, I could see myself just laying down in bed listening to this track.
Drinking schnapps and gin, and she said, Hansel, you're really bringing me down. And he says, Gretel, you can really be a bitch.
You know what I think my issue with it is that, I spoke before about liking her speaking voice. I think this is too in the middle for me. Like, it's sing-songy talking, but not in a way that works for me. Like I said, the lyrics are good. I like the kind of meditative feel of it, and I like the storytelling, but her voice irritates me on that track.
It took me a while to grow to love that one. Weirdly, my favorite tracks on the album are probably Strange Angels and Monkey's Paw.
Yeah.
And then
so very similar to me, yeah.
The last three.
Okay.
So not very similar to you.
Okay.
I love Dream Before, My Eyes, and Hiawatha.
Okay. Well, I wasn't going to play My Eyes, but let's do it.
Sometimes I wish I hadn't gotten that tattoo. Sometimes I wish I married you. 105, 100 days. Sometimes I feel like a stranger.
Again, I don't dislike it. I don't dislike any of the tracks on this album except for probably Coolsville.
The closest to a mainstream
straightforward song.
song on there.
It is,
It's-
which is why
it's just
it was one that
that
didn't stand out
chorus
to
of
me.
the bajillions of stars.
Yeah.
I just think it's beautiful. But
Yeah.
it is probably the most straightforward pop song on there.
Yeah, because there's lots of songs on here where
I'm surprised you didn't like Hiawatha though.
we'll
It's
play it out to end the show.
like it's almost straight poetry. I mean, some of it's not her poetry. Some of it's other people's poetry, but the whole thing kind of feels like a musical poem to me.
Yeah. We'll play it out to end the show. Like, I didn't dislike any tracks on this album except for probably Coolsville is the only one that I was like, I don't like
give
this.
you that.
But I think that this is a solid album. And I think, like I said about The Northman, I feel like part of this is probably on me. It's probably coming in with expectations after having heard Strange Angels.
Maybe I should have given you a gap between them and not done them right on top of one another.
You know, it's interesting that you heard this album first and were still able to really connect with both. And it's funny when we go into something.
I had zero preconceptions coming into this. It was just when I was coming into it, it was I guess a pop album that had an extra layer of kind of poetry and art to it, rather than coming at it going, I'm expecting art and poetry.
Yes.
And this just feels kind of like a pop album.
Yeah. So again, there's nothing wrong with the album. I think that production-wise, it's really nice. There's a hell of a lot of musicians on there. I had a look on Wikipedia at the...
You got Bobby McFerrin doing vocals in there.
Oh, man. There are
Mr.
so
Don't Worry,
many.
Be Happy.
It's crazy. It's crazy how many people are playing instruments on this thing.
Did you see Meatloaf does some backing vocals?
I
don't know what
see
track
that.
it is. But yeah, Meatloaf is who is it? It's Meatloaf, Bobby McFerrin. I'm forgetting some. The guest list is off the fucking chain.
So all in all, I think this is a good album. I'm giving it a 7. It's not bad.
Oh.
I think, again, my expectations were the ones that were just like, okay, this is, I'm in for something really kind of cool and different here. And there is some of that, but I think mostly it's an 80s pop album, which I like 80s pop. So that's fine. It's just, so yep. All right. I know what I'm going to give you next week. I hope. I feel like I've been a little bit too on the indie side of the fence. I want to start throwing some bigger albums at you, but it's tough because I don't know. I don't know what you've heard already. But I think we've been pretty lucky on this show. Like you've been able to throw like Midnight Oil at me. Who were some of the other big bands that you've given me? The Doors.
The Doors.
I was lucky to have never heard that. So I'm going to try my luck here. Now, this was one of the biggest bands in the world in the late 90s, early 2000s. So I'm expecting that you are familiar.
I spent most of the 90s drunk, so I might have missed shit.
I'm expecting that you are familiar with pop punk giants Blink-182.
I believe I've heard of them.
How big of a listener of theirs are you? Have you ever listened to a full album?
I have... Let me think. I have one album of theirs. I can't remember the name of it, but I believe it has the porn star Janine on the front cover.
The Nurse?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's Enema of the State, which was their... That was the album that launched them to stardom. All the Small Things.
Was that the also? Yeah.
Yeah. What's My Age Again? That was the big one for them.
And I've heard other stuff. I've probably got a best of somewhere, but I think that's the only album.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm hoping that this will be okay then. After that, they released an album called Take Off Your Pants and Jacket, which is very much in the same vein as Enema of the State.
I'm familiar
very
with the name
pop-punk.
because it's very, very funny.
And then after that, in 2003, they released an untitled album. Which is just sometimes it's referred to as self-titled, sometimes untitled. It's got a smiley face on the front, and that's it.
Oh, it's their white album,
and it for Blink-182 was very, very experimental. Like there's still elements of pop punk there, but there's Robert Smith from The Cure sings a song on it. Like they really kind of branched out, and it's for the time for 2003. I spoke about this last week with Fountains of Wayne. For the time, it's very much an album. Tracks flow into one another. It kind of tells an overarching story. There's interludes, and it's really, really interesting and not what anyone was expecting from Blink-182 at the time. So I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on that one, and hopefully you haven't heard too many of the tracks. There were maybe 2 singles off it that were pretty big. I Miss You was a big one.
I do know that song.
And there was another one called Always, which was
Don't think I
a
know
bit of a
that.
hit. So, all right. That's good. Hopefully you're not too familiar with it. All right.
Cool.
Looking
I like
forward to
them,
that one.
So that's good. Yeah.
All
Nice.
right.
Bit of punky punk.
Well, thank you for joining us here on the Hunt for the Perfect Album, and we'll play you out with some Laurie Anderson.
Nice.
Big sea wall. Downward through the evening twilight, in the days that are forgotten, from the land of sky blue water. And I said, hello, operator, get me Memphis, Tennessee. And she said, I know who you're trying to call, darling. And he's not home, he's been away. But you can hear him on the air. He's home.